You're a very intriguing group. Thank you for inviting us. And I hope you're going to find my comments interesting. I just want to repeat that I don't speak for the CBC, although as a union boss many times I prayed, it's been my fantasy that I would speak for the CBC, so that's not the case. However, I think even CBC would agree with and support most of what I'm going to say tonight, because on the topic of public broadcasting, we all think alike, that it's a valuable and needed service. Does anyone mind if I sit down? Thank you. Yes, and the other, in the interest of full disclosure, it's funny, I haven't seen Steve for a long time, but 20 years ago we worked together. We were both anchors on Newsworld when it started. And at that time, Steve had long hair, a very bold move for an anchor. He had long curly hair, and I had the short anchor television bob. And yes, and Steve is a member of the Canadian Media Guild. So some of you probably have never heard of us. We're a union, 25-year-old union, a very progressive union that represents mostly media workers. So folks at CBC, at Radio Canada, at Canadian Press, Page Masters, TPO, TFO, Shaw, Consumer Media, about 10 media organizations, including freelancers who work in media. But of course, the majority of our members work at CBC Television. Sorry, am I holding this mic close enough? Can everybody hear me? Okay, so that's who we are, and we have one thing common with all of you. We're nonpartisan. So what that means from our point of view is that we fight for or against various issues, not for or against any political party. You know, I think the mic is cutting in and out.
Yeah,
it is. I could just try to stop that.
Yeah, we'll try this one, and then...
Oh, I need your voice. You have a real radio voice.
Oh, thank you.
I can use that. Okay, I think this one is a little better. So yes, my point was just that we are also nonpartisan. We don't support a political party. We support whoever is going to support better funding for the CBC. Any politician who's going to get on that bandwagon, I would be in favor of. And ironically, it was a conservative prime minister in 1932 who set up the CBC. So if Barbie Bennett was prime minister now, well, I might be voting differently. True. That's right. Okay, so yes, I am obviously very supportive of the CBC. Just looking down here to see where to start. The concept of public broadcasting is something that's been around for decades. We didn't invent it. There are successful public broadcasters in almost every Western developed country. Germany, Japan, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Australia. Everyone has one. Almost everyone has one, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into as I carry on. In CBC's particular case, it's a little more complex because we may be the only one that has to broadcast in 2 official languages, and also in 8 Aboriginal languages across a huge country. In most other countries, it isn't as complex or as demanding because, of course, well, look at the size of Sweden or Finland or Great Britain. The logistics are much smaller. That poses a lot more problems for us, and that the CBC is mandated to do a wide range of services across a very diverse country, and that can be expensive and complicated, which is one of the problems for CBC when it comes to funding. Okay, so yes, you know, why is public broadcasting valuable? I have a quote here somewhere, but I'm hesitant to take the time to find it. But more or less, when CBC was started in 1932, they had a recommendation at the time that it was necessary to keep American penetration at a minimum. And it's funny, that's 80 years ago. And when you think of how far we have come or not come, it's still just as valid a reason. Although that's not on one of my top 10 reasons, that's just an interesting little fact. So why is public broadcasting still important? We believe it fosters a national spirit, shared values. I worked in every province in this country, and there's so many differences in food and language and culture. Just, anyone here know what a bunny hug is? In Saskatchewan, that's what we call a hoodie. Oh, you know. So there's many, many differences in every province, and yet when you think about it, people across Canada see themselves as generous, as fair, as tolerant. We have a lot of shared values, so how do we come by that? People come to Canada from all over. How do we all wind up having a very similar sense of self? And we believe one of those reasons is by having a national public broadcasters that reflects stories of the community, our stories to each other across the country. And the CBC is the largest network that does that. It has, I was going to say staff, it has a presence in 57 different communities across the country. And you can't beat that kind of exposure. It bridges the French and English gap. So CBC provides English programming in Quebec and French programming outside of Quebec, so that everyone can have information in the language of their choice. It broadcasts in 8 Aboriginal languages in the north. Many northern residents aren't fluent in French or English. They still have the same need for information. In a democracy, you want to vote based on actual information and facts if you're going to provide that. In the north, CBC provides it with Aboriginal languages. It creates original Canadian programming and is the largest distributor of Canadian content. I was watching television a few weeks ago, and it was Denis Villeneuve's, some call that a masterpiece, one of the best films of 2011, Les Ensembles. I'm probably not saying that right. Is anyone here a francophone that can correct my pronunciation? Les Ensembles. Exactly. It's an incredible movie. Would anybody else hear that? Well, it's in French, but it makes you so proud to be Canadian when you watch something like that. That's what CBC excels at. It interprets the world through Canadian eyes. This is what I was referring to in 1932 when they originally started CBC. That it has the most foreign correspondents and foreign bureaus around the world, rather than hiring freelancers, residents of those countries, or what often happens using American newscasters. But then you're seeing the world interpreted from a viewpoint that might not be what Canadians expect or want to hear. And we think that's important and continues to be important. Some people might say even more important, given that we live next door to a cultural giant and phenomena that is American programming. And of course, the American worldview. It supports amateur sports. On any weekend you can see cycling, triathlon. Does everyone know what a triathlon is? Yes, very popular now. You see them on television all the time.
Not that you're running in one, but I know what it is.
Swimming. You know, these are our future star athletes. They need exposure. And how do you get exposure? No one is going to make money broadcasting amateur sports. I'm not talking about the NHL and professional sports, but the CBC does. Why? Because it has a mandate to do it. I mean, how many people watch the Pan Am Games and the Parapan Games? Again, no network's making money broadcasting that. But who wasn't proud watching Andre de Grasse, win the 100 meters? And then subsequently in Beijing, placing third. But anyway, that was CBC. I digress. He's such a great runner. But in any case, yeah, so that's the kind of thing it does. Number 7. This is in a past life when CBC was better funded. It was a leader in developing technology, HD broadcasting, streaming, live. They had a pilot project with the NHL and stream hockey games. So it was at the forefront of using the technology in the industry at a time when it was a little better funded. But we could be that way again. It promotes diversity. At CBC, at least 50% of staff are female. It hasn't done as well on the diversity front, but I can tell you from working there for many years, it is an issue. It's often discussed. It has to report diversity numbers, unlike private networks, so it is a leader in that field as well. It does have a long way to go. But I think you've probably noticed yourselves in the last 5 or 10 years a significant difference and a better representation of our population on television and online.
There's only one speaker over there.
And I'm almost at the end here. Number 9, it's not dependent on commercial interests. So it can't be pressured to cover stories a specific way, or not to cover stories, or not to do difficult stories, or not to hold important people to account, because it doesn't have to worry that they're going to yank the ads, or they're not going to get sponsorship for the, some event that financial interest will be at stake. That's a huge plus of public, they only get with public broadcasting. And finally, you'll be happy on my last reason, number 10, why the public broadcasting is an incredible service. It provides all of this information in multiple languages multiple platforms across the second biggest land mass in the world. It's trusted, it's accurate, and it includes Canada's most popular online news site. And what does all this cost? Well, at the moment, $29 per Canadian. That's less than a book.
Per year.
Yeah, per year, that's right. Per year, less than a dinner date. We think it's shockingly low, embarrassing. It's less than half what Finland, Norway, Sweden pay for their public broadcaster. Most developed countries pay $87 per citizen, the equivalent of to support the public broadcasting. And we think that in CBC's case, if it doesn't get an increase to even half that, 43 is something the unions are recommending, it will be irrelevant, risks being irrelevant in the future because it just can't continue. I don't want to get off on a tangent here about funding and cuts and all that kind of thing, but I think we all know that you can't have a super service if it doesn't have any funding. Now the last thing, I just want to end off with a quote. This is from the UN. There's a particular UN committee tasked with cultural issues. It's a long, long name, I won't bother you with it. I'm just going to read a little bit. It's the UN's definition of public broadcasting. It's neither commercial nor state controlled. Public broadcasting is only resident is public service. It's a public organization. It encourages access to and participation in public life, develops knowledge, broadens horizons, and helps people understand themselves by better understanding the world and others. It's a meeting place where all are welcome. And just to cut to a very nice, concise explanation, British writer Anthony Smith said he was referring to the BBC, but we think CBC and TVO could fit as well. Public broadcasting has probably been the greatest of the instruments of social democracy of the century. And that's the end of my top 10 list. Thank you for listening and for inviting me.